Hi everyone, have a bit of a different position today just to accommodate my back, but otherwise it should be the same old, trying to read from the book by Turek and Geisler. There won't be really anything going on screen. There's, the book itself and all of that, but otherwise there's not really much going on, so you can have this on in the background. It's the way I like to listen to YouTube videos too. I have heard from some of you in the comment section that the frustrated faces that I make are part of the fun, so in that case, I guess you still get to see them. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. We are in Chapter 5, titled The First Life, Natural Law or Divine Awe. And we have a quote here from Ariel Roth: "God never performed a miracle to convince an atheist because his ordinary works provide sufficient evidence." Now, if you're like me, you probably cringed just hearing that. This seems a bit strange because wouldn't God know that his ordinary works are not sufficient for somebody who is an atheist? That's why we're an atheist, because we don't look at the world and say, oh, this is obviously designed, we must therefore find a designer, and that designer must be singular, outside of space-time, and all this other stuff. So wouldn't God need to perform a miracle? And then, God does perform miracles, allegedly, right? So why wouldn't he perform a miracle to win people over so they can go to heaven and not hell? I don't know, it just seems really, really picky. It's almost like saying that I shouldn't help a student after class because my lesson is sufficient. And for a lot of students, my lessons are sufficient, but for some students, they need a little bit of extra help. They need to ask for clarification, or they just kind of need the whole thing re-explained to them in a completely different way so they can understand it. How bad of a teacher would I be if I said, no, I'm not going to give you any extra help after school. My lesson is sufficient. That would just be bad teaching. That's just lazy. I can't imagine that a God with infinite power on its own infinite timeline couldn't find the time or desire or motivation to help us out, So that's a bit odd, but it is what it is. So this section is called Take Out the Garbage, Mom. 16-year-old Johnny, oh boy, can we stop? Can we stop with these? These are again, I'm thinking that this book is supposed to at least kind of target atheists. I think we pretty much can agree that the main target audience is just Christians who want to believe that they're right and that atheists are foolish. Let's show how foolish atheists are. But I think that, if I was writing a book like this, I would hope an atheist would pick it up. I include them in the title, sort of a kind of a little cheeky jab at them, just so they can be convinced to pick it up, or at least interested in picking it up. And knowing atheists are more likely to want to argue science, which is why the authors keep including all this very unnecessary science and history, like the Apollo 11 or Apollo 13, recounting from the previous chapter. Why are we then starting off with 16-year-old Johnny came down? What are we doing here? This is like storytelling from the pulpit. A lot of us left the church, right? We're not just randomly atheists in this society. A lot of us had left the church, so we're used to hearing these kind of anecdotes from the pulpit, and they didn't help. So all right. So 16-year-old Johnny came down from his bedroom and stumbled into the kitchen to get a bowl of his favorite cereal, Alphabets. When he got to the table, he was surprised to see that the cereal box was knocked over and the alphabet letters spelled "Take out the garbage, Mom" on the placemat. So, for those of you guys that don't know, Alphabets are these... It was just a cereal, a little bit sweet, but not overly sweet, and it was shaped like letters of the alphabet. Recalling a recent high school biology lesson, Johnny didn't attribute the message to his mom. What? After all, he'd just been taught that life itself is merely a product of mindless natural laws. What? See, this is where they're trying to show that atheists are so absurd. It's clearly stupid for somebody to think this way. Therefore, this is the stupidity of the concept of abiogenesis, right? But okay, I'm not a biologist, but I think one of the big arguments about this, the kind of like a counter argument for this common apologist claim, I think one of the big counter arguments is that we something like an alphabet serial is not a replicating thing. It's not a something that produces. It's reproduces. And in reproduction, we have changes in genetic code, and those changes in genetic code, aka mutations, these are what kind of spur changes along the way. So we can go from maybe some kind of, like a person who has no ability to, digest lactose as an adult, suddenly we get this change, well not suddenly, but we get this change in parts of the human population where now that they can digest lactose. And this is not something that would happen for an object that is not changing in some manner. That's pretty much it. I'm sure more of you guys can explain this a little bit more eloquently than I can, especially if you have a lot more of a biology background. But yeah, an alpha bit is not, product of mindless natural laws. It has to be a mind. Well, yeah, we understand language is a mind. I do wonder if he's going to go, or the authors are going to go into that argument about, well, if we see language is created by a mind, but the DNA has letters, that's like a language, but not realizing we attributed those letters. I don't know. It can kind of go any way but the right way at this point. All right. So if that's the case, Johnny thought, why couldn't a simple message like take out the garbage, Mom, be the product of mindless natural laws as well? Maybe the cat knocked the box over, or an earthquake shook the house. No sense jumping to conclusions. John didn't want to take out the garbage anyway. He didn't have time. Oh boy, here it is. That atheist is ignoring the obvious message because they don't want to follow God. I know. I keep going off the side here. I think I'll have to move myself a little bit. I haven't pre-read this, so I haven't prepared this video. All right. So yeah, we're having this atheist just don't want to believe kind of thing. This has been the author's point of, one of their main points, I guess, that we're going to provide something so obvious that anybody who disagrees, they don't disagree because it's unscientific. They disagree because they just don't want to follow God. They don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to this and that. But of course, these are really kind of tired arguments. They've already been countered many times. So I'm really not sure why they thought this, just rehashing the same thing, would be worthwhile. I don't know. I wonder how well this book sold. Anyway. He didn't have time for house chores. This was summer vacation, and he wanted to get to the beach. Mary would be there. Since Mary was the girl Scott liked, too, Johnny wanted to get to the beach early to beat Scott there. But when Johnny arrived, he saw Mary and Scott walking hand in hand along the shore. As he followed them at a distance, he looked down and saw a heart drawn in the sand with the words, "Mary loves Scott," scrawled inside. For a moment, Johnny felt his heart sink, but his thoughts of biology class rescued him from deep despair. Maybe this is just another case of natural laws at work. Yeah, they're just doing that Johnny is an idiot. Now, I will say that as I was reading this, I was having a thought that wouldn't a better way for Mom to communicate is any other way than pouring out a bunch of cereal pieces and forming some kind of, maybe she could have sent him a text. Maybe she could have told him directly. Maybe she could have put a big piece of paper on the table with something written on it. So even in this analogy where we're supposed to be looking at how stupid Johnny is for ignoring the obvious signs, the first big sign from the God, in this case, Mom, it's not even a very good sign. It's kind of out of the way and ridiculous. So I don't know. I don't know what he's trying to prove here. Well, I do know what he's trying to prove, but I don't know why he thinks this is the right way to do it. Maybe this is just another case of natural laws at work, he thought. Perhaps sand crabs or an unusual wave pattern just happened to produce this love note naturally. No sense in accepting a conclusion he didn't like. Johnny would just have to ignore the corroborating evidence of the hand-holding. I will say the other glaring error with this is that no student is going to be thinking of their class this much. Johnny is really this dense. He wasn't paying attention in biology class anyway. So why now, during summer vacation, this is what he keeps running to, when he could just say, maybe Scott wrote that, but Mary disagreed. Maybe it wasn't really Scott that I saw, but maybe it was like Mary's cousin or something along those lines where, yeah, they're kind of close, but it's not romantic. There are a lot of other explanations than jumping to this. So this is, again, it's clunky, it's unnecessary, it's only supposed to be what the authors keep running into, just like trying to have like a gotcha moment to atheists, caught you with your pants down, haha, can't argue your way out of this. But like I said, even just the mom, it doesn't make sense. And the other thing that doesn't make sense too is these are coming from two different people. So this is coming from Scott, who apparently wrote this, or Mary, whoever. And then it's coming from mom. So is this the idea that there's like multiple gods? Are we having an argument for pantheism here? Comforted by the fact that the principles he learned in his biology class could help him avoid conclusions he didn't like. No, that is not. I mean, this is really the case of the authors, not the case of the atheists they're trying to create this analogy for, but it's the case of the authors. I don't understand what was explained to me, so I'm just going to reach a very ridiculous conclusion about it. This is really like telling on the authors, not making the atheists look bad. Johnny decided to lie down for a few minutes to get a little sun. As he put his head back on his towel, he noticed the message in the clouds, "Drink Coke." The white puffy letters revealed on the sky blue background. Unusual cloud formation, Johnny thought. Swirling winds, perhaps? No, Johnny couldn't play the game of denial any longer. Drink Coke was the real thing. A message like that was a sure sign of intelligence. It couldn't be the results of natural forces, because natural forces have never been observed to create messages. Even though he never saw a plane, Johnny knew there must have been a skyrider up there recently. Besides, he wanted to believe this message. The hot sun had left him parched, thirsting for a Coke. So, wait, so in this analogy, what is it? That Johnny now is, what, Hindu? Because he goes through some other stuff, and there's many messages coming from many sources, and eventually he believes it, so he's a polytheist now. What is the message here? That eventually he was hit with language didn't evolve from natural dust and wind? I mean, what is this? What is the message at the end? Are we wanting to believe the message of Jesus in heaven? Is that the analogy? I don't even understand the analogy that's trying to be made. I also like that it says a message like that was a sure sign of intelligence. It couldn't be the result of natural forces, but they forgot the period. So, yeah, this message was... Of course typos happen, but I just think it was an interesting coincidence that that's where it showed up. This is just bad. You guys, I shouldn't be reading this with my back issues, man. This is going to just make everything worse. Oh boy. The other thing that I kind of thought about just reading this as well is the authors have to write this because it's not obvious enough from God. So why didn't God write this? That's a big question that I have. God should have written this, right? Especially if we want to compare something like writing to a natural process. We know that writing doesn't arise naturally from like geological processes, right? There's no climate situation that's going to produce a written language that follows a certain kind of like grammatical rules and syntax and all of this stuff, right? So the authors are using language which they know doesn't just show up out of nowhere. They're using this, and they're saying that of course it's stupid that Johnny would think that language is natural, because obviously language had to come from like an intelligent source. So aren't the authors saying that we can definitely notice that some things are created by an intelligence and some things are not? Right? So again, they think they're making a point, but it's kind of like when my students are trying to use academic language. So some of them will run a few of their words through a thesaurus. And in trying to sound academic, they really lose the message because some of those words are not entirely analogous, right? So if you have something like small versus the word minuscule, in the these can be used incorrectly depending on the context, right? But if you're trying to make this language sound more academic, then you might throw in the word minuscule, but then it completely alters the meaning of the sentence. And I think that's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to make something so absurd that they don't realize they're the ones showing that they don't know anything. They're trying to show that atheists are so in denial that they don't realize they're not making the point that they want to make. So again, I just, if a student started off a science paper this way, no. No, I don't know, just bizarre. Not very good writing. Simple life, there's no such thing. So we have a new section. One needs to be playing with only half a deck or be willfully blind to suggest that messages like take out the garbage, Mom, and Mary loves Scott are the work of natural laws. Yet these conclusions are perfectly consistent with the principles taught in most high school and college biology classes today. Really? Again, you're just telling on yourself. You haven't taken a high school biology class. If you took it, you weren't paying attention. You were like Johnny. You were just kind of making things up and hoping you got through class. And I'll be honest, when I had high school biology, I was still very Christian, and I refused to learn anything about evolution. When we studied that part, I brought a Bible and I sat in the back of my classroom and read my Bible instead of listening to the lesson. And I told my teacher I was going to do it. It wasn't like a sneaky form of protest or anything. I just told her I disagree with this and I'm just going to be sitting in the back quietly reading my Bible. And she didn't care. That was fine by her. I thought that by showing my faith, I would have that moment that you hear about in youth group where everybody is falling on their face and just has to, come to God and that they're all going to convert and all this stuff, which of course never happened. All that happened was I didn't realize that evolution was pretty simple. It wasn't this evil thing. It was just a bunch of principles that we kind of know already happen just because I can see that I'm not an exact copy of my parents or my grandparents. And over time, kind of like taking a long journey, each journey may start and end at two totally different places, but between those, point A and point B, there's just simple one step in front of the other. So in the same way, if you have a one animal that seems very different from another animal, whether their diets are different, their habitats are different, etc., you can kind of just see how they get there through these steps. And the steps are really convenient now because we can actually trace them through the DNA, like through their genealogy. I don't think genealogy is the right word, but through their genes, we can kind of go through the history of that. So it's really interesting, and I felt really stupid that I didn't learn about evolution until after I became atheist. I just watched this little 10-minute YouTube video. This was back in 2012, 2013. So it was after I started my channel even, and I just thought, that's it? This is what I've been so against this whole time. This is what I've been arguing against. All the things that were taught to me from Hank Hanegraaff, from the church leaders, different kinds of Christian radio, Christian TV. None of those things were stated. None of those things are being claimed by biologists. These were all things that I was told to make evolution sound so stupid. It's sad, honestly, because remember, these authors are guys that have gone through some form of education. I don't know how good the education is because I haven't checked into the universities and such, but they've gone through some form of education, and all they came out with is that DNA that can reproduce, and as it reproduces, it makes changes or hiccups or mistakes or something happen because we are not have perfect carbon copies of our parents. This is something that they're saying is the same as trying to claim language came out of nowhere, or that language evolved through processes of like wind and dirt and water. That's so bizarre that this is all they took away from school. So that's where naturalist biologists dogmatically assert that the messages, far more complicated, are the mindless products of natural laws. They make this claim in trying to explain the origin of life. Notice they keep using the word mindless, because technically, if we just look at it really blandly and objectively, it's without a mind, right? But of course, it implies something stupid, something wild or unguided, or it should have been mitigated with logical and rational thought, but it wasn't, like mindless violence, for example. In reality, a better term, a more neutral term probably would have been something like, are far more complicated are the products of natural laws, not the mindless products of natural laws. Or the products of natural laws that no being interfered with, or no being created. Something like that would probably be a bit more of a neutral way to phrase it, but I don't think these authors really care about coming across as neutral. They've been pretty condescending for this entire book thus far. They make this claim in trying to explain the origin of life. Naturalistic biologists assert that life generated spontaneously from non-living chemicals by natural laws without any intelligent intervention. Such a theory might have seemed plausible to a 19th century scientist who didn't have the technology to investigate the cell and discover its amazing complexity. But today this naturalistic theory flies in the face of everything we know about natural laws and biological systems. I will say that as somebody who studied engineering, the hallmark of good design is simplicity, not complexity. So this idea that it's really complex. I mean, I'm sitting funky today because my back. My back is complex, especially for me being bipedal, right? This is not the type of back that, like, there would be a better way to design a back. Wouldn't there? Wouldn't there be a much better way to design the spine, to design the human skeleton? What we have is so similar to what other animals have. It's kind of, I don't want to use the word obvious, but it's something that can be readily apparent. I guess it's just a fancy way to say obvious, isn't it? It's something that would maybe give you pause for thought. That if my back, and I have a spine, I've got a pelvis, and a lot of this is pretty similar to something in an animal that's got 4 legs. Is there a better position for my back to be in given its structure? So the human back is not super great, which is why I'm having trouble with it. It's just not a great thing. This is not something like an intelligent God would do. This is not intelligently designed. It works as good as one could hope for the situation that we're in. It's one of those things where it's like, if you, like in the military, the Marines are not well funded. So anytime something broke down, we just had to figure it out. We had to come up with a way to just make it work. Usually it involved duct tape and such. We just had to figure out a way to make it work. It wasn't intelligently repaired. It was repaired as well as it could have been repaired given the circumstances. It was enough to be functional, but there's a lot of problems, and we should probably get this actually fixed sooner rather than later by somebody who knows what they're doing. You know what I mean? That's where we end up with complexity. When we come up with these really complex ways to fix something that's broken, this is what we end up with. When we have something that is really complex in its initial starting design, this is usually a person who wasn't really sure how to do it, so they threw in a bunch of extra stuff. A really good example is when my students had to do an egg drop thing. It was just kind of for fun, just a little experiment that we had, a little project we had. where we would take an egg. I made sure it was hard boiled so it wouldn't make a big mess, but we dropped it off like the third story, and the students had to create some kind of construction around it. And the students who really either didn't get any help for their parents, didn't look up anything online, or they just weren't really sure what they were doing, these students would try to create something really, really big. A lot of really big containers. They would have a lot of pieces just kind of there because they weren't really sure how they were supposed to be doing this, and they weren't really understanding of all the math physics involved. But students that, got a little help from their parents, or they tried to find some information online or something from people who knew better, or students that played around with this before, they knew that there were some pretty simple structures that they could set up. So you would have a student who had something that looked like the freaking Hulk, and a student that had something that was very bare bones. And the bare bones one was the one that protected the egg, where the Hulk one, the egg still bounced around and cracked inside of this structure. So the complexity was a hallmark of ignorance to how to solve the problem. So I really don't like this idea about complexity, that, it's amazing, it's complex, therefore it was designed by an all-knowing perfect being. If it was designed by a being, God is not good at what he does. It's just not. Okay. So it's an amazing complexity, but today, this naturalistic theory flies in the face of everything we know about the natural laws and biological systems. Does it? If it does, then why isn't it removed? Like from the curriculum. So they're saying that it goes against current understanding of biology, yet they're still teaching it in biology classes. That doesn't make any sense. These guys think, because one of the problems that we run into is that because religion is very authority-based, that there's one authority, there's God, and then there's other authorities you kind of listen to, like your pastor, the priest, the bishop, the imam, it just depends on what religion and what sect of that religion. But there's like levels of authority. When it comes to something like a divine revelation, this is one person's idea, and we see this pretty often in things like the LDS Church. We see it in Jehovah's Witnesses, how sometimes a later revelation will contradict a prior revelation, or that somebody might have a totally different interpretation reading the text compared to somebody who had this so-called divine revelation. And so we get into these ways to kind of mend and harmonize the text and harmonize the revelation, because the two are seemingly contradictory, but we just had to find a way to make it work because now it's part of our theology and we can't get rid of it. So they also think this is how science works. They really don't understand that any answer from a scientific experiment is a good answer. If the answer is we couldn't prove the hypothesis and it seems like the opposite is true, that's a good answer too, because it can help us, help point us in the right direction. So this idea that they're saying that, they put in this first dogma, so now they have to, harmonize it with the new dogma, so they just kind of teach these contradictory messages and stuff. This really tells on themselves from their point of thinking, from their stance, their point of view. Since the 1950s, advancing technology, this is another thing I've noticed, I'm sorry, I keep stopping every 2 seconds. Their information is really, really outdated. Remember, this was written in 2004. And they keep referring to people from the 1950s. They keep quote mining from the 60s, from the 30s. Why is their stuff so old? And the only thing I can think of is that the stuff they learned while they were in school, perhaps something from the 1950s or 1960s was pretty new. But now that we're in 2004, as of the writing of this book, we end up with this issue of this is now outdated. If it's true, then it's still true, and you still have to find information to support it today. When I was finishing up my master's degree, that was one thing that was a little bit kind of annoying, was that I had read a lot of stuff that was going to help me with my final kind of project to get the degree. but some of it came from like the 1980s, and I thought that was good because this shows that even as early as the 1980s, we were able to, or we were finding this information that I was trying to use for my degree program, and the basic thing is that if it's true, then it's still true today. Somebody is going to have done something that is referencing it, or they're going to do something that updates it. And that's going to be something that will have happened in the past 5 years. So the vast majority of sources I had to use were from the past 5 years. So to see these guys looking at science, which is this changing, and it talks about advancing technology and all this other stuff, to see them still using quotes from the 60s, the 50s, the 30s, it shows they don't have the right experience for writing something that is scientifically minded. Anyway, since the 1950s, advancing technology has enabled scientists to discover a tiny world of awesome design and astonishing complexity. At the same time that our telescopes are seeing farther out into space, our microscopes are seeing deeper into the components of life. While our space observations have yielded the anthropic principle of physics, which was discussed in the last chapter, our life observations are yielding an equally impressive anthropic principle of biology. To show you what we mean, let's consider the so-called simple life, a one-celled animal known as an amoeba. Naturalistic evolutionists claim that this one-celled amoeba, I like how they included that because I don't think that these guys would accept theistic evolution. But anyway, naturalistic evolutionists claim that this one-celled amoeba, or something like it, came together by spontaneous generation, i.e. without intelligent intervention. Whoa, that's not what spontaneous generation means. Now again, I'm not like up and up on the biology science, but this is something that I have to teach as a history teacher, this idea of spontaneous generation. And that's not what it means. Not without intelligent intervention. This was an idea that, like, you guys probably know about it, this idea that if you leave a rotting piece of meat somewhere in the corner, then tomorrow there's going to be maggots on it that have spontaneously generated. Or if you put it into like another container, not realizing that flies have laid eggs on it already, then eventually you're going to get maggots that become flies, and it looks like it's spontaneously generating from meat. And these are things that we know are false because they were proposed and then tested. So it's, I'm really tired of let's use science to disprove science. Again, with that beginning with little Johnny, they really told themselves, we're going to adopt the science we like, and then we're going to throw away the rest of it that we don't, and just say, oh, it doesn't make any sense. We can't explain why, but it just doesn't. Anyway, so spontaneous generation in a warm little pond somewhere on the very early Earth. According to their theory, it's not a theory, all biological life has evolved from the first amoeba without any intelligent guidance at all. This, of course, is the theory of macroevolution. Whoa, 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 whoa. No, it's not. From the infantile to the reptile to the gentile, or from the goo to you via the zoo. The theory of macroevolution is goo to you via the zoo. No citation given, right? The theory of macroevolution. Wow. This shows that like Hank Hanegraaff was your guy, not necessarily Hank Hanegraaff, but guys like him that are religious guys writing about why evolution is wrong. These are guys like Ken Ham. These are guys like, I don't know, no more come to mind. What, Ray Comfort, I guess. This isn't something that you're necessarily going to find in evolution. And then there's I've seen it once, so don't quote me on this, but there was something about macroevolution and microevolution, and this was only referring to the scale. So this was something like evolution that is on the scale of like a bacterium versus evolution that's on a scale of something that we can see with the naked eye. But the way that theists use it, or this particular type of theist, I should say, the way that they use it is this idea like microevolution is maybe somebody growing a little bit taller than their parents, or somebody having a different hair color, but macroevolution is changing from one species to another. So even if we use terms that sometimes appear in some scientific sources, if you find it, they're not the correct terms. It's the same as when people today use gaslighting interchangeably with the word lying. Gaslighting isn't lying, it's just the people who adopted this into pop culture don't really understand what it actually says, because they don't care, they never looked it up, and they don't even know that there is an actual definition that differs from the way they're using it. I would doubt that both of these authors even understand that macro-micro thing that I said, because they think it's infantile to reptile to gentile. Believers in this theory of origin are called by many names: naturalistic evolutionists, materialists, humanists, atheists, and Darwinists. What do you mean called by many names? Atheists aren't defined by this. There are atheists who just say, I don't know. I don't know, maybe something could have made this. I don't know. And maybe something made us by accident. So it would be created by a being, like a god, but it would be unintelligently created, not designed. So, humanists. Why would a humanist be something you there are Christian humanists. Wow. Again, Darwinists. The remainder of this chapter will refer to believers in this atheistic evolutionary theory as Darwinists or atheists. Wow. This does not include those who believe in theistic evolution, that evolution was guided by God. I'm surprised they even included that. The only people who call evolutionists, the only people who call them Darwinists are creationists. Nobody uses that term. That would be like me constantly citing Freud when I'm talking about psychology today. There's been a lot of changes since Freud's time. There's been a lot of changes since Darwin's time. So I'm not sure why, somebody wouldn't call me a Freudist. They would say a psychologist, right? So I don't know. Regardless of what we call true believers in this theory, true believers, there's, that loaded kind of theistic language. The key question for us is this: is their theory true? It appears not. Well, it's not what it appears to be, it's what you can demonstrate to be the case. And again, they're misusing the term theory. Because I don't know if, even if it's the scientific theory of macroevolution, it is not what was explained up here about goo to you via the zoo. So we're already starting off really bad. How far did we come? 3 pages? Oh, good gracious. Oh, good gracious. Believers in this theory, okay. Forget the Darwinist assertions about men descending from apes. We are apes. Or birds evolving from reptiles. They diverged. Anyway, the supreme problem for Darwinists is not explaining how all life forms are related, although we'll see in the next chapter that's still a major problem. The supreme problem for Darwinists is explaining the origin of the first life. Okay, but Darwin was about life that's in existence. Like, if we're just going to go back to Darwin, just Darwin, because we're going to call him Darwinist, he was talking about how life changes, not about first life. That's like saying a YouTube channel that talks about baking isn't good enough because they're not talking about the historical origin of wheat. They're using wheat, but they're not talking about it. That's bizarre. Do they not understand that these are different disciplines? No, they don't understand. Let's just answer that question for them. They don't understand these are different disciplines of biology. For unguided, naturalistic macroevolution to be true, the first life must have generated spontaneously from non-living chemicals. I like how they keep phrasing non-living chemicals, they being apologists or theists trying to talk about this, as if that's not what my brain is running on. It's like adrenaline is not a living entity. Serotonin is not a thinking entity. These are non-living chemicals, right? I don't like that. Life runs on non-living chemicals. I don't understand why this is like water. Isn't water a chemical? I'm not a chemistry major or anything, but isn't water a chemical too technically? Because It's not an element, since it's some kind of combination, right? H2O. So our life relies on non-living chemicals. The carbon in my body, the protein, these are non-living chemicals. I mean, well, maybe not carbon being a chemical, but you guys know what I'm saying. This is... Anyway, unfortunately for Darwinists, the first life, or indeed any form of life, is by no means simple. This became abundantly clear in 1953. Again, this ancient history as far as science is concerned, when James Watson and Francis Crick discovered DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. I like how they put that in there. Oh, we know what we're talking about. The chemical that encodes instructions for building and replicating all living things. DNA has a helical structure that looks like a twisted ladder. The sides of the ladder, again, I'm not coming to you guys for you to explain DNA to me. I'm coming to you guys to explain how DNA couldn't possibly have come about. So they're telling us. So let's see if we get what we're looking for. The sides of the ladder are formed by alternating deoxyribose and phosphate molecules, and the rungs of the ladder consist of a specific order of 4 nitrogen bases. These nitrogen bases are adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, which are commonly represented by the letters A, T, C, and G. These letters comprise what is known as the 4-letter genetic alphabet. This alphabet is identical to our English alphabet in terms of its ability to communicate a message. Sir, please. They did it. They did it. They said that they're analogous. Wow. Okay. In terms of its ability to communicate a message, except that the genetic alphabet has only 4 letters instead of 26. Just as the specific order of the letters in this sentence communicates a unique message, the specific order of A, T, C, and G within a living cell determines the unique genetic makeup of that living entity. Another name for that message or information, whether it's a sentence or DNA, is specified complexity. In other words, not only is it complex, but it contains a specific message. Oh boy. I love when they just throw in these terms. The incredible specified complexity of life becomes obvious when one considers the message found in DNA of a one-celled amoeba. A creature so small, several hundred could be lined up on an inch. Curse you, metric, right? To hell with you, metric. Staunch Darwinist Richard Dawkins, professor of zoology. Why not just say zoologist? Zoologist Richard Dawkins, professor of zoology at Oxford University, admits that the message found in the cell nucleus of a tiny amoeba is more than 30 volumes. Look at admits that the message found is more than 30 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Again, they're using this loaded language. I would go in, again, if this was something a student submitted to me in a social science class, I would say you can't use this type of loaded language because it has an implication of trying to hide a lie and then having to expose that you were lying. So we don't want to do that because they didn't admit to anything in the sense of exposing a lie that they tried to hide. Because where's the lie where's the lie that Dawkins was trying to hide? That there wasn't information found in the cell nucleus? That's what a biologist would try to hide, is that there wasn't information? Okay. So, let's see. All 30 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica combined, and the entire amoeba has as much information in its DNA as 1,000 complete sets of the Encyclopedia Britannica. What do we mean as much information as the 1,000 complete sets? So if we have a set of the Encyclopedia Britannica, hang on. If we have a set of the Encyclopedia Britannica times 1,000, we're not getting 1,000 times more information. It's the same information repeated. So why are they saying as much information as the complete sets of Encyclopedia Britannica times 1,000? It's the same information. Are they just trying? What are they trying to say? In these ways when they're trying to blow us away with stuff like, oh, it's a lot, that's a big number. We kind of lose what they're actually trying to convey here. In other words, okay, good. If you were to spell out the A, T, C, and G in the unjustly called primitive amoeba, as Dawkins describes it, the letters would fill 1,000 complete sets of the encyclopedia. Why not just say they would fill up a certain number of pages? So look, it's not the information, whoops, sorry about that, not the information in the DNA, it's the number of letters. That's it. So that's what they're saying. That's information is a bunch of letters on a page times a lot of pages. Let me say this. You have a bunch of letters on a page and we didn't learn nothing. We ain't got no information, okay? There's no information that's being conveyed here other than the authors are woefully ill-equipped to explain what's going on. Or to explain what they're claiming to explain. So, wow, guys, there's a lot of letters. Therefore, God. Okay, a lot of letters. Therefore, God. You know, and this is another kind of concept that goes back to like early religion. This idea that if I can create a small mound, like if I take dirt and I create a small mound, but this mountain is 1,000 times bigger than my mound, then a being 1,000 times bigger than me must have created it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, oh, if we can make one complete set of Encyclopedia Britannica, but these letters can fill up 1,000 times that, then there must be something 1,000 times bigger than us, and that thing is God. You know, it's just such a, like, you're here trying to outcompete yourself with how wow you can make it, and not realize that you're not really saying anything. Now, we must emphasize that these 1,000 encyclopedias do not just consist of random letters, oh good, but of letters in a very specific order, just like real encyclopedias. So here's the key question for Darwinists like Dawkins. If simple messages such as take out the garbage mom, Mary loves Scott, and drink Coke require an intelligent being, then why doesn't a message 1,000 encyclopedias long require one? And there it is. I called it, right? Because I've heard these arguments before. They're trying to say that these letters are exactly analogous to these other letters. That the letters in this message are exactly analogous to the letters in this other message because they give information. The information they give are things like produce a cell, or things like how to, like the color of your hair, or responding to sunlight. These are not things that are written out in a way that has some kind of grammatical structure. And I can kind of see where they want to make them analogous, but they're not. They just aren't. That's like saying that if you have 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, they have a message to share with us, that they come together and they know to come together to create 1 water molecule. That's similar to what they're saying. That these biological processes, these chemical processes of our biology are the exact same as creating a message with letters based off of grammar, vocabulary, and all of this other stuff. And it's just not the same. It's just not. When 2 magnets touch each other and they come together, there's, in a way, I guess you could call that a message, but it's not a message like a language conveying an idea from a being. These are processes. And I think that's where they kind of mess this up, is that these are not analogous. Just because we've assigned letters to them, it doesn't make them any less of just a chemistry situation, you know. Darwinists can't answer this question, well, I guess it just did, can't answer that question by showing how natural laws could do the job. Instead, they define the rules of science so narrowly that intelligence is ruled out in advance, leaving natural laws the only game in town. You mean by saying it has to be falsifiable? Is that what you mean? Please don't be what you mean. Let's find out. Before we describe how and why Darwinists do this, let's take a look at the scientific principles that ought to be used in discovering how the first life began. New section, investigating the origin of first life. Many evolutionists, as well as many creationists, I'm just going to stop, I'm sorry. To me, one of the coolest organisms that came to be was fungus. It's really great. I really like fungus. I think that learning about the first fungi, however you want to pronounce that, that is so much more interesting than this. Because this is speculative nonsense based off of a totally just like failure to understand what's actually being said by people who study this professionally. These are two people that do not have a scientific background trying to argue science. For me, I'm not looking this up. I'm reading this in real time and I'm sharing this with you guys, and I keep saying I'm not a chemist, I'm not a biologist. These are just things that I'm kind of poking through here. And if you guys want to look this up, that's really great. And that really helps out, especially when people who know way more about the subject than I do, they share this information in the comment section. I love that. This is one of the best parts about doing this series, is that I'm learning so much more about stuff because of your guys' different experience, expertise, or curiosity looking it up. I just think that learning about something that we have evidence for, like the first fungi, it's really, really cool, and it gives us a really interesting picture of how life came to be on this planet and how the early Earth was and how far we've really come, and it's really cool. And instead, these guys are dedicating their life to something that cannot be demonstrated to be true because they just really want it to be true, while accusing the rest of us of believing something or not believing something because we just really want that to be true. I don't know. I mean, this book could have been something else. It could have been in their expertise. And just because they're not scientists doesn't mean they don't have expertise. They could have talked about theology. That would have been fine. Why are you, a person who has no background in this, writing a book as if you have a background? I would never do that. Why would you do that? I have no idea. I have no idea. If you guys have an idea, please let me know. But I have no idea. It's, I guess a great example of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Having a little bit of information and thinking it's so simple that you can just kind of explain it away. Both, of course, okay, so many evolutionists as well as creationists speak as if they know, beyond any doubt, how the first life came into existence. Both, of course, cannot be right. If one is right, then the other is wrong, so how can we discover who's right? The following fact is obvious, but often overlooked. No human observed the first origin of life, sure. The emergence of the first life on Earth was at one time an unrepeatable historical event. No one was present to see it, neither evolutionists nor creationists were there, and if we certainly can't travel back in time and directly observe whether the first life was created by some kind of intelligence or arose by natural laws from the non-living materials. Yeah, but I would argue even if you did travel back in time, you would still say, oh, I'm sure God sparked this somehow. Kind of like when people call childbirth a miracle, it's a natural process. It's pretty cool. It's really interesting that two really small cells get together and then create something that's a bunch of cells that's functional. I mean, my beloved Choco, who I'm looking at right now, he's very big and very amazing. And it was because Coconut and Krampus got together. And there were 6 kittens, and Choco was one of those kittens. The rest of them went to good homes for free because we didn't want some people just to buy them because they're Maine Coons. It amazes me that this chunky, funky little boy, this big ball of fur, this thing with its own personality and his sass and his demands for tummy rubs was the byproduct of Krampus and Coconut having an intimate moment where a bit of DNA was shared. But I wouldn't call it a miracle. I would call it awesome, I would call it amazing, but I would never call it a miracle. But a lot of Christians do. And so the point here is that if we can travel back in time and we see that these things are still naturally arising, a creationist who traveled back in time and witnessed that would say, well, obviously it was still put here by God. I mean, who created the earth anyway? Who created the universe anyway? Who willed it into existence? It must have been God anyway. So even if we can show that this is natural processes, even if we can totally understand later on how the situation in the early earth could create these proteins and such that would lead to life as we understand it, even if we can show it, they're just going to say, well, it was obviously created by humans, they're intelligent, therefore it must have been created by an intelligence. So sort of a, I don't know, just sort of a weird claim because we know you would still blame God that this happened. Not blame God, but attribute it to God. Anyway, that raises an important question. If we can't directly observe the past, then what scientific principles can we use to help us discover what caused the first life? We use the same principles that are utilized every day in our criminal justice system. Thank you, Chunk. This is what I mean by his sass. So the same principles that we use every day in our criminal justice system, forensic principles. In other words, so now they're going to tell us about forensic science. These two non-forensic people are going to tell us about forensic everything. Wonderful. And not only about forensics, but how we're going to use that to understand how the early Earth began. This is, again, why I kind of said, it seems very Dunning-Kruger, because with these tiny pieces of information, not even an introductory understanding of this concept, they think they've got it nailed. In other words, the origin of life is like a forensic question that requires us to piece together evidence, much like detectives piece together evidence from a murder. Detectives can't go back in time and witness the murder again. Neither can they revive the victim and go back into the laboratory to conduct some kind of experiment that will allow them to observe and repeat the crime over and over again. Instead, they must utilize the principles of forensic science to discover what really happened. Well, if we're going to use this idea, nobody says that the murderer was some kind of interdimensional being that we will never see again. So we should just drop it because there's no point in trying to find who actually did it, because we know, or we're jumping to this conclusion that it was an interdimensional being that left our dimension, so we can't help him, or we can't catch him. They're not going to say that. They're going to try to find some answer. So then why are the authors trying to claim that this is exactly like forensic science if they're the ones claiming an interdimensional being is the killer? I don't know. The central principle in forensic science is the principle of uniformity, which holds that the cause... somebody verify that, please, because I can't even take them at their word at this point. Notice that there's no citation. They cited Dawkins, but they didn't cite this. Okay. Which holds that the causes in the past were like the causes we observe today. In other words, the principle of uniformity, we assume that the world worked in the past just like it works today, especially when it comes to causes. If take out the garbage, mom requires an intelligent cause today, then any similar message from the past must also require an intelligent cause. Conversely, if natural laws can do the job today, then the principle of uniformity would lead us to conclude natural laws could do the job in the past. Consider the Grand Canyon. What caused it? Did anyone see it form? No. But by the principle of uniformity, we can conclude that natural processes, particularly water erosion... Oh, chunk. We can conclude that the natural processes, particularly water erosion, were responsible for the Grand Canyon. We can conclude this confidently, even though we were not there to see it happen, because we can observe these natural processes creating canyons today. We see this in nature when we observe water's effect on a landmass. We can even go into the laboratory and repeatedly pour water in the middle of a mass of dirt, and we will always get a canyon. Now consider another geologic formation, Mount Rushmore. Well, that's like a geologic art piece, a geologic sculpture. I wouldn't say a geologic formation. So they're phrasing it as if it's a natural process, but it's something that is clearly human-made or intelligently created, right? So what caused this? Common sense would tell us we would never suggest that the presidential faces on Mount Rushmore were the result of natural laws. Erosion couldn't have done that. Our common sense is actually the principle of uniformity. Since we never observe natural laws chiseling a highly detailed sculpture of a president's head into a stone at the present time, we rightly conclude that the natural laws couldn't have done it in the past either. Today, we only see intelligent beings creating detailed sculptures. As a result, we rightly conclude that in the past, only an intelligent being, a sculptor, could have created faces on Mount Rushmore. Great. We've just spent 2 long paragraphs explaining something that didn't need to be explained. Please make sure it has a very good direct analogy to what we're trying to talk about. In the same way, when we look at the first one-celled life, the principle of uniformity tells us that only an intelligent cause could assemble the equivalent of 1,000 encyclopedias. What? So They're really running with this. They're saying, look, it's like the same as 1,000 encyclopedias. And we know that humans can create encyclopedias. Therefore, first cell is intelligently designed. This is, this is worse than I could have thought. Like, I've had 2 nails break off because I'm so, wow. This is worse than I could have ever guessed. Wow. 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 They made a poor analogy, and through that poor analogy, they have decided they've got the answer. Natural laws have never been observed to create a simple message like drink Coke, much less a message 1,000 encyclopedias long. Again, these aren't messages any more than 2 magnets send messages to each other to come together. That's the level of message that atoms are interacting with each other to form molecules. That's the message that we're talking about here. All I'm thinking is I put on makeup for this. Wow. Why then do Darwinists come to the conclusion that the first life generated spontaneously from non-living chemicals without intelligent intervention? I don't know, because those non-living chemicals are the things that are the message that you're talking about. They're the things interacting to create the message. But the message is not a message like you're thinking an email or a book is a message. So why then do Darwinists come to that conclusion? Because they understand it better than you do. That's why. That's it. That's it. Spontaneous generation of life has never been observed. Neither has a God creating a one-celled organism. That has also never been observed. Your poor analogy doesn't fix that. Ever since Pasteur sterilized his flask, one of the most fundamental observations in all of science has been that life arises only from similar existing life. Scientists have been unable to combine chemicals in a test tube and arrive at a DNA molecule, much less life. Now this also has a source. Nothing else, but this does. Nothing else important that we actually care about, but this does. This is something that I always found to be a sort of easy to move the goalpost kind of claim, that if we cannot create life in a test tube, or we can't create a DNA molecule in a test tube, it's obviously so complex that God must have done it. But then if we get to the point where we can create it, then they're going to say, see, it had to be intelligently designed. In fact, all experiments designed to spontaneously generate life, I mean, I'm not reading ahead, you guys. I'm really not. This is like every time they make some comment and I make a comment about it, it's like the next sentence, it's exactly what I was getting to. In fact, all experiments designed to spontaneously generate life, including the now discredited Urey-Miller experiment, have not only failed, but also suffer from an illegitimate application of intelligence. In other words, scientists intelligently contrive experiments, but they still cannot do what we are told mindless natural laws have done. I mean, are we supposed to again, magnetism, do we invent magnetism? Do we have to intelligently design atoms coming together to form molecules? Do we intelligently design that? This is what they're talking about as mindless natural laws versus messages, is just chemicals interacting. That's it. That's not the same as a language. Why do they think it's the same as a language? So why should we believe that mindless processes can do what brilliant scientists cannot do? And even if scientists did eventually create life in the laboratory, it would prove creation. Oh my God! Didn't I just say that? Why? Because their efforts would show that it takes a lot of intelligence to create life. Oh my God, I just said that. Wow. Wow. I mean, this is how tired these arguments are that I heard them in church. Do you know what I'm saying? This is how tired this stuff is. My goodness. My goodness. Do Darwinists insist on spontaneous generation because they just don't see the evidence for design? Not at all. In fact, exactly the opposite is true. They see the evidence clearly. For example, Richard Dawkins named his book The Blind Watchmaker in response to William Paley's design argument we cited in the last chapter. The appearance of design in life is admitted on the first page in The Blind Watchmaker. Dawkins writes, biology is the study of the complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. 2 pages later, despite acknowledging the intricate architecture and precision engineering in human life, I'm sure, I mean, again, I didn't read the book, but I don't trust what these authors are saying. I'm sure this was quote mined from something that talks about like the intricate architecture and precision engineering of my spine, which sucks, or the intricate architecture and precision engineering of the human eyeball, which sucks. You know what I'm saying? Like this can't, we can't take them at their word because these guys are constantly pulling things out of context. So in human life and the trillions of cells within the human body, Dawkins flatly denies that human life or any other life had been designed. Apparently Dawkins refuses to allow observation to interfere with his conclusions. What? What observation? When did you observe life being designed? Or that because these things are intricate, therefore they must be designed? Or they appear to be precision engineered, therefore they must have been precision engineered? And again, they're not precision engineered. Ask somebody with multiple sclerosis about their body's precision engineering, okay? This is very strange for a man who believes in the supremacy of science, which is supposed to be based on observation. Again, I really just cannot take these guys seriously. Francis Crick, co-discoverer of DNA and another ardent Darwinist, and again, they're still using this term they made up. They being apologists, not these guys particularly, but maybe they were the ones that popularized it, I'm not sure. But this is just outdated nonsense to call somebody a Darwinist. Another ardent Darwinist agrees with Dawkins about the appearance of design. In fact, the appearance of design is so clear he warns that biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed but rather evolved. Again, it's a piece of a sentence. They're not properly quoting it. Crick's little memo to biologist led Philip Johnson, author and leader of the Intelligent Design ID movement, to observe, Darwinian biologists must keep repeating the reminder to themselves because otherwise they might become conscious of the reality that is staring them in the face and trying to get their attention. My honest guess here, based off of what I know about these guys, is that this biologist must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed but rather evolved. I would say that it's because it's very easy for us to say, wow, this looks complicated, I guess God made it. Because that's exactly the creationist argument. This is complicated, therefore God must have created it. So that's what I'm guessing here. It's just a reminder that we can kind of break it down and learn about it, study it, that we can't just say, oh, God did it, and move on and not learn anything. The complexity of DNA is not only a problem for Darwinists, its origin is also a problem. A difficult chicken-egg dilemma exists because DNA relies on proteins for its production, but proteins rely on DNA for their production. So which came first, the proteins or DNA? One must have already been in existence for the other to be made. Okay, so which one did God make first? I don't know I've heard this argument from theists, but I haven't heard necessarily a counter-argument or anything because I haven't checked into it and haven't happened across it. But this still doesn't answer intelligent design. Are they saying that God spontaneously generated a single-celled organism? That everything was ready, the proteins and the DNA? What is so then what is the counterclaim here? That God created the starter DNA and the equipment to make protein? I mean, what are they arguing? They're trying to show, well, look how ridiculous this is. Okay, so then what's your idea about it? So why do Crick, Dawkins, and others in their camp ignore the plain implications of the evidence staring them in the face? Well, probably because there's no evidence of a God. So just like we're not going to assume an interdimensional being did the murder, we're probably not going to assume an interdimensional being made the cell. Because their preconceived ideology, naturalism, prevents them from even considering an intelligent cause. No, it just shows... It has to be falsifiable. How are we going to falsify God? That's the problem, is when we get to the point where we just say, well, God must have created it, we have to just stop there. There's nowhere else we can go. We can study more about something else that's kind of related, but we're not going to dive deeper into trying to learn more about this concept once we've decided, well, it's pretty complicated. I guess God must have done it. That's it. We're not going to try to figure it out beyond that. And this is where there's, been so many issues with how throwing God as an answer makes the person think they've answered the question. And if you think you've answered the question, you're going to stop asking it, and you're going to stop investigating it. That's the problem. So as we're about to see, this is bad science, and it leads to wrong conclusions. Now we have the other section, good science versus bad science. Oh, good. They're going to address the other thing I said, where I like it when they use the science they like and throw out the science they don't. It is commonly believed that the so-called creation-evolution debate, now often called the intelligent design versus naturalism debate, entails a war between religion and science, the Bible and science, or faith and reason. This perception is perpetuated by the media, who consistently depict the debate in terms of the 1960 movie Inherit the Wind, which fictionalized the 1925 Scope's monkey trial. You know that depiction. It basically goes like this. Here come those crazy religious fundamentalists again, and they want to impose their dogmatic religion and ignore objective science. See, this is why we just kind of follow where the evidence leads, so we don't end up putting these ideas, our biases on stuff, right? But I like, those crazy those crazy atheists, If they're against this idea of misrepresenting the other group as crazy, stupid, etc., fundamentalist, mindlessly following the dogma, then why do they represent atheists that way? They're not against that concept, they're just against it being applied to them. So, yeah, moral high ground. Actually, nothing could be further from the truth. The creation-evolution debate is not about religion versus science, or the Bible versus science. It's about good science versus bad science. Likewise, it's not about faith versus reason. It's about reasonable faith versus unreasonable faith. It may surprise you just to see who is practicing the bad science and who has the unreasonable faith. Well, it doesn't surprise us. You told us in the introduction or first chapter. As we've mentioned before, science is a search for causes. Logically, there are only two types of causes, intelligent and non-intelligent, i.e. natural. Really? There's two types of causes? What about, accidental? Because I think intelligent cause implies some kind of guidance or some kind of deliberate action. What about just an accident? The Grand Canyon had a natural cause, and Mount Rushmore had an intelligent one. Right, so one is designed and one is not designed. But one is designed and one is not designed because it's a natural process. But what about an accident? Something that's not designed, but it was caused by an intelligent agent or just some kind of being of questionable intelligence. Unfortunately, on the question of first life, Darwinists like Dawkins and Crick rule out intelligence causes before they even look at the evidence. In other words, their conclusions are preloaded in their assumptions. Spontaneous generation by natural laws must be the cause of life because they consider no other options. So again, yeah, just like the detective is not going to consider that aliens killed somebody or an interdimensional Bigfoot killed somebody, the scientists are not going to say, what if this thing that we can never test? They're going to try to figure it out with things they can test. That's the nature of the game. Spontaneous generation is what critics of evolution call just so story. Evolutionists provide no evidence to support spontaneous generation. But again, it's not part of evolution. It's part of a different part of biology, isn't it? It isn't supported by empirical observation of forensic science principles. It's just so because life exists. And since intelligent causes are ruled out in advance, no, they're just not assumed in advance. There's a difference. If you can demonstrate an intelligent cause, That's it. The end. We accept it. That's it. If you can demonstrate an intelligent cause, you've demonstrated an intelligent cause. That's it. And that's kind of the problem, is they're saying, well, it's good faith versus bad faith. It's both faith. It's not faith. One of them is saying, I'm not going to jump to conclusions, and the other one is saying, I'm perfectly comfortable jumping to conclusions. One of them says, I don't have enough information to come to a conclusion, and the other one says, I don't really understand the information, so I'll come to a conclusion based off of that. It must be too complicated, therefore God. The problem for Darwinists is immense. Biochemist Klaus Does admits that more than 30 years of research into the origin of life led to a better perception of the immensity of the problem of the origin of life on Earth rather than its solution. At present, all discussions on the principal theories and experiments in the field either end in stalemate or with confession of ignorance. Okay, but when was this guy... I don't know Klaus Does. This one I will look up. Let me see. So it turns out I found the exact abstract just by chance, typing in Klaus Does. I didn't check the specific citation. So it says, more than 30 years of experimentation on the origin of life in the fields of chemical and molecular evolution have led to a better perception of the immensity of the problem of the origin of life on Earth rather than its solution. Now, the reason I looked this up is because I wanted to see if this guy was from like 1822 or something, you know. At present, all discussions on principal theories and experiments in the field either end in stalemate or confession of ignorance. New lines of thinking and experimentation must be tried. The continued exploration of our solar system, especially a better knowledge of Mars and Venus, let me make this a little bit bigger, of comets and carbonaceous meteorites, may also lead to a better understanding of the prebiotic environment on Earth and will thus help us to design a more appropriate prebiotic stimulation experiments. There it is. Do you see what I mean about these authors ripping things out of context? All this is saying is that currently we're still not sure. So let's look at new findings on Mars and Venus, and let's look outside of Earth to see if there's anything that it could have helped to really help us kind of understand what could Earth have been like before life. You know, what could that prebiotic environment look like, especially since we were hit by things like meteorites. Could that be something that could be related? Is there anything that we know about Mars and Venus that could somehow give us some ideas about the early Earth? You know, it's not saying at all, wow, we don't know anything, I guess I'm going to quit and just be a theologian. It doesn't say that. I am so disappointed in these authors. I don't know, guys. I'm getting to the point where I'm not really 100% sure I even want to finish this book. Because, I mean, just look at how super dishonest that is. If a student would have put this into something. The only reason I'm even going to finish this book is for people who encounter theists who have these talking points, or for if you're a theist that has these talking points. That's the only reason I'm even going to finish this book. Because if my students have done stuff like this, where they try to find an idea, like they'll have an idea, especially they'll get it from ChatGPT, and then they'll try to find a source because they know they have to use a source, and they think they can trick me because they think I don't know how ChatGPT sounds. So they'll look up like a piece of what ChatGPT spat out. So they'll copy a sentence or part of a sentence, like a keyword, they'll Google it, they'll find some kind of source that looks better than Quora, and then they'll put that in as their source, and it shows up on the works cited page and everything. But when I actually read what the source has to say, it doesn't say anything remotely similar to what they've said. Or there's like a piece of something, but all the rest of the information in the paragraph must have come from some other source, because it definitely doesn't show up in that source. So for them to claim that all of the information in these, 7-sentence paragraph, for example, all of it comes from this one single source, and I look at it and it absolutely doesn't, I mark them down for that. Obviously, this is just bad writing, especially if you're writing for something like a science class, a social science class, etc. In the same way, I would fail these authors, at least give them at best a 60%. They have a lot of meandering stuff, bad analogies, jumping to conclusions they shouldn't be jumping to, and I would even go, I don't know if I would go as far as to say abusing quotes, but they're definitely not using quotes for how they should be used. They're grossly misrepresenting it. I'm actually going to write to Klaus Does and all the other authors, if there are other authors here. I'm going to write to them and just let them know this is how your work is being grossly misrepresented. Disgusting. So shameful. If you have to lie to make your point, you need to reconsider if your point is worth making. Frank and Norman. Francis Crick laments, every time I write a paper on the origin of life, I swear I will never write another one because there's too much speculation running after too few facts. Yeah, I'm going to assume it's the same as the Klaus Does thing. That the following sentence is a really good explanation of why the pursuit of science is important and the pursuit of knowledge is important. Because why would a person that dedicates their life to this lament that they don't know what they're doing? Oh golly guys, I'm just such a simple little scientist. I don't know what I'm doing. Those guys, Frank and Norman, they really know what I'm doing and they know I'm a liar. I mean, that's really how they're trying to represent these guys, because they're being intellectually honest. So they're pulling out stuff where they're saying, it's like I'm sure that they would do the same thing to me when I'm trying to explain this to my students, that they cannot use hard words like this proves, or this proves beyond the shadow of a doubt, or this is hard evidence for, and they have to use things like this indicates. They have to explain in their experiment write-up at least one way that they would improve the experiment, and at least one way the experiment could have been flawed. What could have happened to give the results that were received? Those are things that they have to consider to show this is a very humbling experience. Having to go through and try to figure out things like human behavior. This is nothing that any simple experiment is going to solve. It can help kind of point us in a different direction, hopefully the right direction, and if it's not the right direction, we find out pretty soon and we kind of move on from there. The problem comes in when people who have zero background in this stuff think they know what they're talking about. It's kind of like when you look at the DSM and you think you can diagnose yourself because there's some stuff in there that sound like it applies to you. And I know me better than anybody else knows me, so I know that this applies to me kind of thing. Therefore, I diagnose myself with ADHD kind of thing. Not realizing that the diagnostic criteria means something to people doing the diagnosis. That thing that it means to those people is something different than it means to the lay person. So I think that's what these guys run into. Again, it's just that Dunning-Kruger. The evidence is so strong for intelligence and against naturalism that the prominent evolutionists have actually suggested aliens deposited the first life here. Fred Hoyle, the same evolutionist who popularized the steady-state theory that we discussed in Chapter 3, invented this far-out theory called panspermia for seeds everywhere. After calculating the probability of life arising by spontaneous generation was effectively zero. Of course, panspermia doesn't solve the problem, it simply puts it off another step. Who made the intelligent aliens? As crazy as the theory sounds, at least panspermia advocates recognize some kind of intelligence must be behind the amazing wonder we call life. Now, as far as I understand, by the way, when they're talking about alien, they're talking about extraterrestrial. They're not talking, now again, maybe this isn't what Fred Hoyle proposed, but this is like the modern interpretation of panspermia. But it's basically that, like we saw with that abstract we just looked at from Klaus Does, that it's this idea that perhaps something like a meteorite could have contributed to something that goes from prebiotic to biotic. That's what they mean by extraterrestrial. But you say like extraterrestrial, it's like when you say the word UFO. People will just jump to, oh my god, aliens! UFO just means I don't know what's in the sky. That's it. Me, a person who doesn't really know what goes on up there, looked up and saw something. I don't really know what it could be, so it's unidentified. nobody's saying that it's aliens. But some people just can't separate those two concepts. Still, when top evolutionists have to resort to aliens to explain the origin of life, the simplest life must be incredibly complex. Another panspermia advocate, Chandra Wickremesinghe, admits that Darwinists are acting on blind faith. Again, the word admits. These guys need a thesaurus, okay? They need a different word. Come on, y'all. They're acting on blind faith when it comes to spontaneous generation. He observes, the emergence of life from primordial soup on Earth is merely an article of faith that scientists are finding difficult to shed. There is no experimental evidence to support this at this present time. Indeed, all attempts to create life from non-life, starting from Pasteur, have been unsuccessful. Microbiologist Michael Denton, although himself an atheist, adds, the complexity of the simplest known type of cell is so great that it is impossible to accept that such an object could have been thrown together suddenly by some kind of freakish, vastly improbable event. Such an occurrence would be indistinguishable from a miracle. I really am going to just assume that he's trying to argue the creationist point. Something like, creationists have a hard time accepting this. Their claim is that the complexity of the simplest known type of cell is so great that it is impossible to... This is what I would assume. Because we just spot-checked one, and it was completely the opposite. And from the stuff that I've posted, or the videos that I've posted before, some of you guys are more familiar with the text from like Carl Sagan, and you were able to explain the context behind it, and that these guys are ripping it wildly out of context. So I can't assume that these guys are actually reading this to understand the context. I feel like they're doing just what my students are doing. They have an idea, and they look it up for some kind of quote mining that sounds like it fits. They put it in there, and they don't actually read it to understand what's actually being said, and that it in no way supports their argument. In light of the just so explanations, such as spontaneous generation and panspermia, who do you think is practicing the bad science? The people who derisively call religious the theists and creationists, or the enlightened ones? Who calls themselves an enlightened one, other than a religious person? The atheists and Darwinists, who are really just as religious as the religious. Physicist and information scientist Hubert Yockey realizes it's the Darwinists. He writes, the belief that life on Earth arose spontaneously from non-living matter is simply a matter of faith and strict reductionism, and is based entirely on ideology. Again, it doesn't really help when these are quotes that aren't even explained. It's they're just kind of thrown in there, aren't they? Like they're not really adding anything. Like what are they trying to prove with these quotes? If we take them at face value, all they're saying is that some of these biologists think that this is an article of faith. So what? How does that prove a God? Again, this is one of those things where they're kind of trying to distract us, like, oh, look at these great quotes we have, and look at these big names, and look at all this stuff, and look at all of these other things, and look, I even included a reference this time. They're trying to just distract us with these quotes, but when we really look at them, what conclusion are they coming to? What goal are they trying to get at with these quotes? It's just bizarre. Yockey is right. Darwinists falsely believe that they can reduce life to non-living chemical components. Exactly what I just said, right? Exactly what I just said. They have an idea. They're not reading anything. They're quote mining. They're sticking it in here to make it sound like they're right, just like my students do when they use ChatGPT and have to figure out, oh no, we need sources for this, otherwise we're not going to get any points. That's what the goal was. The goal wasn't to show this proves God or disproves their so-called spontaneous generation. It doesn't do that. It just supports what they want to say, that these guys think, some of these guys think, And who cares? What is this? One guy? Fred Hoyle, Chandra, Michael, Hubert. That's 4 people in the entirety of biology. They can pick 4 names and 4 specific quotes drastically pulled out of context that kind of imply what they're trying to get at. And we're supposed to just say, wow, gosh, all of science, blah, 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 blah. Wow, yeah, it must be God. That's the ideology of reductionism. For Darwinists like Dawkins or Crick, who must believe that the only material and not immaterial exists, well, demonstrate the immaterial exists. That's all it takes. That's it. Then life can be nothing more than chemicals. But life is clearly more than chemicals. What do you mean? What do you mean it's more than chemicals? What do you mean clearly more than chemicals? Life contains a message, DNA, that is expressed in chemicals, but those chemicals cannot cause the message any more than chemicals in ink and paper can cause the sentences on this page. What, they think there's like a soul expressing the message in the DNA? Like I said, it's nothing more than magnets have a soul expressing magnetism. This is bizarre. A message points to something beyond chemicals. The message in life, just like the one on this page, and points to an intelligence beyond its chemical elements. We realize that life is certainly more than chemicals with a message, but the key point here is that it's certainly not less. Who said it's less? What if it just is that, chemicals with a message? Why do they keep making false dichotomies? Do they even know they're making false dichotomies? So by blind allegiance to this naturalistic, reductionist ideology, which is against all observation and reason, Darwinists dogmatically assert that life arose spontaneously from non-living chemical components. Ironically, this is exactly what Darwinists have long accused creationists of doing, allowing their ideology to overrule observation and reason. In truth, it's the Darwinists who are allowing their faith to overrule observation and reason. Creationists and intelligent design proponents are simply making a rational inference from the evidence. No, they're not. They are the ones claiming that an interdimensional Bigfoot was the murderer. They are following the evidence exactly where it leads, back to an intelligent cause. An intelligent cause and my back. Those are two things that didn't come together. How much more do we have to read here? Because I don't think I can sit for this long. I also think we've kind of hit a long point of this. I can't sit for very long to edit this, so I think I'm just gonna post it as is. Yeah, and by now it's beyond an hour, so I guess we'll stop here, and maybe I'll stop here at the give time and chance a chance. So we're at least stopping at one of the sections. So by blind allegiance is naturalistic, dogmatically creationist. Okay, Yaki is not the only one pointing out that Darwinists have a philosophical bias against intelligent causes. Again, a bias against. It's just you cannot test it. This is science. We have to test stuff. Where's your testable hypothesis about an intelligent design? You can't even make a reasonable argument. You couldn't even create a good analogy to try to explain that your argument was reasonable to begin with. Philip Johnson serves as the sharp edge of a steel wedge that is now splitting the petrified wood of naturalism in a scientific community. He correctly points out that Darwinism is based on a priori, or prior, commitment to materialism, not on a philosophically neutral assessment of the evidence. Well, how do you neutrally assess the evidence to get to an immaterial concept of an intelligent being that cannot be demonstrated? We can guess he's there, but he can't be demonstrated to be there, right? Separate the philosophy from science and their proud tower collapses. What proud tower? And it's not just the critics of evolution who see this bias. Prominent Darwinists admit it as well. We need an admit counter, don't we? In fact, Dawkins himself had acknowledged the bias in responding to an email question from Philip Johnson. Our philosophical commitment to materialism and reductionism is true, Dawkins wrote, but I would prefer to characterize it as a philosophical commitment to a real explanation as opposed to a complete lack of an explanation, which is what you espouse. I'm glad that they included that, because that sounds like something Dawkins would say, and it sounds like something that makes sense, right? We cannot just jump to conclusions. Dawkins may think he has a real explanation, but as we've seen, his explanation is against all of the observational and forensic evidence. The forensic evidence! It's not even forensic evidence. Oh, do you see what I mean? They don't know anything about forensic evidence. They have claimed that an interdimensional Bigfoot caused the murder, and because they made a claim that sounds similar to something that might have fallen out of a detective's mouth, partially, they are using forensic evidence. Guys, this is pathetic at this point. It's pathetic. If Richard Dawkins leaks out a half-hearted admission of bias, it's not an admission of bias. It's literally the scientific, it's like the first step, or the second step in the scientific method. Step 1, observation. Step 2, create a testable hypothesis. There's no like hidden like, oh, the scientists are hiding this from us. We gotta sneak it out and get them and find it in an email because they're not gonna publish it. It's literally the second step of the scientific method. Darwinist Richard Lewontin of Harvard University gushes a complete written confession. Read how Lewontin acknowledges that Darwinists accept an absurd just so stories that are against common sense because of the prior commitment to materialism. And this is a big block quote. Our willingness to accept scientific claims that are against common sense is the key to an understanding of the real struggle between science and the supernatural. Yeah, that's great, because I think he's probably going to argue that common sense isn't always true. Just because we feel like it's true doesn't mean it's true. We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of the failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just-so stories, because we have a prior commitment to materialism. Yeah, so this says we have to follow the evidence where it leads, even if it can't answer everything. That's all this says. In spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, we have to follow that because we can't just say prayer will make your cancer disappear. We have to say, hey, if you do this, this is the best we have, and you still might die, and we're sorry, but this is the best we have. And when we checked everything else out, like drinking camel urine, this is still the best we've got. It's not perfect, but this is the best we have. That's all this is saying. Are the authors, are they doing this on purpose, or can they really not understand that that's what this sentence meant? It is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of a phenomenal world, but on the contrary, we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. No matter how counterintuitive to the uninitiated, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. In other words, from an outsider point of view, as a lay person, not everything we do is going to make sense to you because you personally feel differently. However, we have to follow the evidence even if you guys don't understand, as people who don't do this professionally, even if you don't understand why this is being done. It's the same kind of thing like when I'm trying to teach a student something, and a student who maybe has some trouble following directions, and they repeatedly have trouble following directions, and then the parents come in during the parent-teacher conference and argue with me that I'm being too harsh on their kid, or that, well, they tried, therefore I should give them full points because they tried. To the parent, this doesn't make sense, that I would hold their child to the same standard as everybody else. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that I have a rubric and I can only grade what was given, not what was tried. To the parent, they see their kid working or claiming to work. They put them through tutoring. They see the kid maybe is frustrated. They're trying really hard. They might be looking up like videos on how to understand something. They see their kid is trying, and they don't understand how that try doesn't necessarily translate to a good grade, because I don't grade them based on try. So from the parent's point of view, I'm being unfair because they see their kid is trying. I should see their kid is trying. Therefore, I should grade them based on the trying. But I can't grade them based on that. I have to only grade them based on what they've produced and how closely what they've produced follows the rubric. Some of the parents don't understand why that's important, but it's important because it means that the grading is standardized and fair. That's the important part. It's fair. Now, if the kid has some issue like ADHD or some kind of learning disability, then yeah, we could create something that's fair to accommodate them. But if it's just somebody who's, some people just have trouble understanding certain topics, and the student is at home frustrated, they're not staying after school asking the teacher. The family is hiring a tutor who doesn't know what's expected in my class instead of just staying after school and asking the teacher for free. So that's really a good way to show that you're trying, is to actually ask the teacher, because the teacher's the one that wrote the rubric. And the parents don't get that because they're uninitiated and they're mystified. And that's really what's being said here, isn't it? That this might not make sense to somebody who doesn't do this professionally, but there's a method to the perception of madness being perceived by the people who don't know what's actually going on. That's all this is saying. I mean, this is my first time reading this, and I have no outside context. They didn't provide, I mean, they provided a link, but they didn't provide the rest of the writing, right? They provided a source, but I didn't check the source. So this is just their own words, their own writing that the authors included. I'm sorry, not their own words, but what the authors included based off of what they thought totally supports their point of view. And from my first plain reading of this, it's so obvious that it speaks exactly like this is a great, 2-3 sentences that pretty much can counter the entire portion of the chapter we've read thus far. Right? Moreover, that materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. Right, we cannot try to claim magic when we're trying not to claim magic. In the same way, I can't grade a student on what their parents observed as effort. I have to grade them on what was presented, and if I allow it once, I have to allow it again. And then it ruins that whole standard of learning and that standard of grading. It ruins it if I let it in even one time. And that's all they're saying. We cannot let it happen once, because it'll happen again, and it'll change the way that we're producing our experiments. That's what this is saying. How did the authors read this and think, this proves what we want? I mean, how did they really read this and think that? I'm not a biologist. So this isn't me saying, oh, I know about biology, and so this is my bias, I understand what they're trying to say and everything. This is me just like as a teacher who can see this is a problem immediately. This is me as a person with medical issues that has tried the mystical stuff like Reiki, for example. This is just me as like a non-scientist reading this and completely understanding what this guy is trying to say. What do you think? The authors just really didn't know what was being said? Whether bias or genuine ignorance? Or do you think they did understand what was being said, but they thought that the readers of their book would be too stupid to catch it? Like, do you think that do we insult their intelligence, or are they insulting our intelligence? Now the real truth comes out. It's not that the evidence supports Darwinism. In fact, according to Linton and our own common sense, again, you're uninitiated. Your common sense doesn't mean anything. Common sense says the earth is flat. Common sense says the earth's not moving. Common sense says that the sun is small and moves across the sky. That's common sense, because that's what we can all agree. That's what it looks like. And I can't really think about how it would be anything else from a very basic, superficial observation. But people who were able to think about it a bit more and try to put some ideas together with like, well, how come the moon has the same phases all the time from the same angle? How come these phases kind of appear when we see lunar eclipses and solar eclipses, and kind of figure out, oh, this can only be the case if everything is spherical and this thing goes around this thing, which goes around this thing. That's a deeper understanding of it. But for the common sense, superficial look, yeah, the earth is flat and the sun is small. That's a common sense appearance to the uninitiated. This is why we don't use common sense, which is what Lewontin was saying. So in fact, according to Lewontin, you shouldn't trust your common sense. Or should not trust it. You shouldn't just use that and run with it as if you're correct. Darwinist explanations are counterintuitive. Yeah, to common sense. It's counterintuitive that the Earth is spinning. The real truth is that Darwinists have defined science in such a way that the only possible answer is Darwinism. No, because remember, Darwinism is not science. It's because if we're using it as another word for evolution, it's a portion of science. They, like a subgroup of biologists, did not define science. How could they even write this sentence? What did they think this meant? Because it doesn't mean what it says. Any other definition would, God forbid, allow God to get his foot in the door. In the next chapter, we'll investigate the possible motivations for keeping God out. Oh, let me guess, you're going to ask 0 atheists for that. For now, the bottom line is this. The event required to get the atheistic theory of macroevolution off the ground, the spontaneous generation, again, that's the wrong term, of first life is believed because of the false philosophical assumptions disguised as science, not because there are legitimate scientific observations that support spontaneous generation. Wow. So what the authors think is being said is that scientists refuse to even consider anything else because of their bias. Really what's being said is we can't allow the supernatural to be an answer in this case because we have to allow it in other cases, and at this time there's no way to test the supernatural. We got to just keep it to what can be tested. The end. Science is really dry, and that's one of the things that makes it interesting to me, but it's less interesting for some people who think it's got like all the answers, because it just doesn't. And with my AP psychology students, having to explain to them that knowing, like, and for people too, when they're asking, like, oh, do you have a master's degree in psych? Like, what, or you're getting your master's degree, when I was still working on it, they said, oh, so you must, like, really have a good handle on like, what goes on in your own head, right? And it's just like, well, just because we understand it doesn't mean that, that it makes everything easy. Just because we understand why this thing happens, it doesn't mean we can just override it simply because we know better, Just because I understand the processes that can cause the emotion of anger, that doesn't mean that I don't get angry. You know what I mean? So for this, it's like we study it, and all we can do is say, huh. And depressingly, sometimes we can find some pretty good information on how to help people, whether it's an individual or like a group of people, because my focus is on social psychology, and we can do that, and we can find really good information to help people, and then it just sits there. It should be adopted by groups that could be benefited from, or could benefit from the research. If we're doing research on like patient adherence to protocols for managing diabetes outside of just taking their prescribed medication, things like lifestyle changes, for example. There are ways that encourage patients to do it, and there are ways that don't encourage patients to do it, and there might be ways that discourage patients to do it. And so we have this research, and so the people that should be utilizing it aren't, and that sucks. So that's one of the downsides to science. Even here, too, these guys are quote mining. They could have just read and learned, and instead they're quote mining. I mean, somebody could quote mine this video, and make it sound like I support what they're saying. It's really sad, it's sad. Especially because they're trying to argue for intelligent design. Well, girl, this book was not intelligently designed, okay? Ugh. So false science is bad science, and it's the Darwinists who are practicing it. So again, not only do they provide no evidence for this, but their own quotes disprove this claim. Their belief in spontaneous generation results from their blind faith in naturalism. It takes tremendous faith to believe the first one-celled creature came together by natural laws, because that's like believing 1,000 encyclopedias resulted from an explosion. Oh, great, an explosion in a printing shop. Atheists can't even explain the origin of the printing shop, much less the 1,000 encyclopedias. Therefore, we don't have enough faith to be atheists. So, in other words, we don't understand the argument and we make faulty analogies. Therefore, we don't have enough faith to be atheists. Okay. Well, disappointing. I am very disappointed in this book, and I'm really disappointed in this half of the chapter. And this half of the chapter, it's long. And I'm not going to apologize for that, because these things are pretty important to be said. This is especially important for people who have to encounter these arguments, or for people who follow these arguments. If you're an atheist and wondering, well, what does an atheist have to say about the arguments that you find convincing? What I found the most frustrating was that the authors included that quote from Lewontin that, again, at a very plain reading, it was clearly the opposite of what the authors intended. And it's so bizarre that they would include it, because it really outs them as not knowing anything about what they're talking about. Because if we boil down that quote, it's basically saying the common sense superficial view doesn't necessarily match up to how in depth this actually goes, and that we have to look at it a lot deeper than just the superficial common sense view. And the authors are proudly claiming, we know better because we're following common sense. And these guys are saying they have to ignore common sense, but we know better because we're following common sense. Like, they don't even realize that they've made fun of themselves in this. It's bizarre that they included this at all. And I think, in getting my master's degree, it really showed me how freaking difficult it is to do a science, okay? I had to take a course that was just on writing surveys. And a common sense approach to writing surveys is anybody can write a survey. I mean, there's free stuff online. There's Google survey something, there's Survey Monkey, there's all kinds of free stuff, and you can make a survey. You can write a poll, which is a type of survey. You can do that on Twitter, aka X, even on Instagram. You can have people voting on your reels, I guess they're called, your reels, to do these polls, a yes-no kind of poll. We can put polls in our live stream. If you're part of the live stream comments, we can put polls there. So this seems like something that's pretty easy to do, because we encounter these pretty frequently. We've probably all taken a poll multiple times in our lives. Even when we were younger, these are things that are in our lives and pretty straightforward appearing. And in reality, this is an entire freaking course at the master's level. And it's just for the psychology of writing stuff for research purposes. It's not even for the history of polls and all this other stuff. We did have to get into that a little bit, but it's not even any of that to kind of fill time. There was so much about just writing questions and how to write questions and which methods to give people the survey. Should it be on paper? Should it be in person? Should it be on the phone? Should it be on the internet? About the order of the questions. It's about whether questions should be close-ended, where you give them a list of choices, or should it be open-ended, where you let them answer the question freely, and then what do you do with that, because one of them has to be processed quantitatively and one has to be processed qualitatively, and then you can turn the qualitative answers into quantitative answers, and then all of this goes into research statistics. So it's not even statistics as a course, it's like a subset of statistics. And it's all of this stuff that I know that only applies to this field. I can't even say the stuff that I've learned applies to biology, which is why I had to keep saying I don't know about biology. I'm not a biologist. I know a bit about the brain and the body, because I had to learn about the brain and adrenal glands and stuff. I know a bit about chemistry in the brain, chemistry in the body, because those things are directly applicable to psychology. but I don't know about chemistry in general, and I can't even remotely say that I do. And so to have that humility with it, to say I can only talk in this tiny scope, and it's a lot of work to even get this far. To have these authors who have no background in anything, to think that they can talk about aeronautics, to think they can talk about forensics, to think they can talk about biology, to think they can talk about chemistry, and their degree is in theology. I have more qualification to talk about biology than they do, and I don't do it. I have more qualification to talk about chemistry than they do, and I don't do it because I know I'm unqualified. And this is the other thing about the, what's it called? The Dunning-Kruger effect. Because there's actually layers or levels of the Dunning-Kruger effect. And so these guys are on one side of it, where they are saying, we know a little bit, but we think we know a lot. So we're going to make a lot of statements about it. And I'm sort of in the intermediate or end of it. So there's two other levels. One level is that as you learn more, you realize you don't know enough. And so even though you know more than the lay person, you keep saying, I don't know enough about it. And then there's the expert level, which I would not put myself at the expert level. But this is something I do have to kind of talk to some, especially new teachers about, because they are maybe experts in their field in that they have a degree and they've worked in that field, and then they come and try to teach a similar topic in the school. They're on the other side of the Dunning-Kruger, where it's this idea that you forget the stuff you know isn't common knowledge. So when you talk about it to students that are like grade 9, 14 years old, never encountered physics or something in their life, you assume that the stuff you've learned, you forget that some of it was learned and it's not like common sense stuff. It's not stuff that these kids would have encountered. And so that's one thing on the other side of it. So there's actually levels of the Dunning-Kruger effect. So this is, an interesting way to kind of combine the two, because I have to keep saying I don't know everything. And these guys are saying we know so much that we can say what we know and what atheists know and what they actually claim to know versus what they actually believe in their heart of hearts kind of thing. These guys are really out there making so many bold claims that they don't even stop to read some of the quotes they've used to realize that those quotes are, when they're put together with their statements, it's almost making fun of them. It's frustrating. And I think that's because I was wondering why I'm so frustrated reading this book. And I started reading this book while I was still working on my degree. And now I'm finished with it, and I think that's where it is. I think that's why I'm so frustrated reading this book, is that these are a bunch of people who are completely unable, in terms of both education and experience, to make these hard, big claims, and yet they wrote an entire freaking book outlining exactly what they don't know as if they know it. And that's what's been really frustrating about this. I really want to emphasize to, for people to consider the source. I've said before, I don't come to Turek and Geisler to learn about NASA. I want to know about your theology, because these guys they're not theists because of anything they've said so far. They're not theists because they've read so many books from different biologists, and they happen to notice that some of the biologists mentioned faith, and they didn't like that, and therefore they became theist. None of this is what made them theist. That's what I'd like to read about. I'd like to read about something to compel us to be theist, or at least to understand why Frank and Norman believe what they believe. That's what I want. And I guess I'm kind of back in church right now, because I remember one of the pastors saying that we shouldn't argue science with an atheist. because he actually said they may have more experience in that than you do. But we need to speak God to them because there's a God-shaped hole in everybody's heart, and that we need to just talk to them theologically. I really wish that Frank and Norman heard that, because maybe we wouldn't be convinced, but we're definitely not convinced with this. And not only are we not convinced with this, we can just see that we shouldn't even, I don't know, we can't even trust these guys with basic quotes. We can't even trust these guys with basic understanding of what they're including as quotes. I can't even trust that they know what they're reading. That they're and I hate to sound condescending, but I can't think of another way to say this right away. So please take this in the most objective and least offensive way that it can be. But I can't even trust that these guys are intelligent enough to read something and understand what the author intended. That's the hard part. It's been amazing to kind of read this, but amazing in a negative way. At least with when they talk about religion from a religious point of view, I don't agree with it, but I can at least see where they're coming from. I can't even see where they're coming from here. I just can't. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me for another one of these. And if you please feel free to write as many comments as possible, because I love reading what you guys say. I don't always have time to respond to it. I try to get back to it when I can. But I really appreciate the stuff that you guys have to say and the questions that you guys you ask as well. If you guys are interested in other stuff that is associated with this channel, there's you can check that out in the details section below. There's links to stuff like Twitter, Instagram, Discord, and so on, as well as Patreon. So for as little as $1 a month, you can access some different posts and things, both in our Discord channel and on Patreon itself. But with that being said, guys, thanks for sticking with me on this one.